On July 3, 1989, Americans celebrating their independence learned that one of their fundamental freedoms was in jeopardy. The U.S. Supreme Court decided in Webster versus Reproductive Health Services to give states the power to restrict abortion. On July 3, 1989, the face of America changed forever. The Webster decision transformed America from a nation confident constitutional rights were safe and unassailable into a people committed to protecting their personal liberty. In the years since the Webster decision, with the help of the National Abortion Rights Action League, pro-choice Americans have found their voice, tested their strength, discovered their power. In the years since Webster, we have learned the stakes are high and that the threat is as real and as close as the next election, the next legislative session, the next Supreme Court appointment. In the years since Webster, we have learned the price of personal liberty, eternal vigilance. The Webster decision signaled an end to America's faith that the Supreme Court would protect the right to choose. Politicians were given the power to interfere in the private lives of Americans. On the day of the decision, NARAL put politicians on notice.
To politicians who oppose choice, we say, read our lips. Take our rights, lose your jobs.
The voting booth and state legislatures are now the front lines in the long, hard fight to secure the right to choose. And NARAL, the political arm of the pro-choice movement, took the lead with its Who Decides campaign and its creation of a massive national grassroots force, the NARAL Action Corps. In anticipation of the Webster ruling, NARAL began its successful campaign to reframe the debate about abortion. NARAL's question, who decides, you or the politicians, reminded Americans that one of their fundamental liberties, their right to make a personal decision free from government interference, was threatened. NARAL's mission in the wake of Webster was to make the Who Decides message resonate with voters, to begin building a political infrastructure to achieve the long-term goal of securing the right to choose.
For better or for worse, the Supreme Court has now made this an issue in Iowa and New Hampshire and New York and Oregon, and it's going to be fought out every place. And now the time has come for us to say to candidates, where do you stand on choice? That's the issue I'm going to vote on. And when we say that long enough and mean it hard enough, we'll win.
NARAL braced itself for the battle, creating training manuals and sponsoring workshops for activists and candidates all across America. The first round of political battles began in California with the candidacy of pro-choice Republican Tricia Hunter. Sophisticated voter identification and get-out-the-vote programs created and implemented by the California Abortion Rights Action League South were credited with providing Hunter's margin of victory. The next opportunities for pro-choice Americans to flex their muscle came in South Carolina with the election of pro-choice candidate Holly Cork to the state assembly, and in California with the election of Lucy Calais to the state senate. Calais, a Catholic publicly threatened with excommunication by her church for her pro-choice position, won election and broke the 2020 deadlock between pro- and anti-choice California state senators. NARAL and its affiliates successfully used sophisticated phone banks, canvassing, voter identification, get-out-the-vote programs, and an unprecedented number of volunteers to elect pro-choice candidates. In Virginia, gubernatorial candidate Doug Wilder made history when he made his pro-choice position a major campaign issue.
Doug Wilder believes the government shouldn't interfere in your right to choose. He wants to keep the politicians out of your personal life.
In New Jersey, gubernatorial candidate James Florio's pro-choice position and his opponents waffling on the issue solidified Florio's lead early in the race. In both Virginia and New Jersey, NARAL used television ads to supplement the grassroots efforts of its affiliates. Who decides? You will. On November 7th, vote to protect your right to choose. Vote for Jim Florio, governor. On Election Day, pro-choice voters helped elect Doug Wilder and Jim Florio governor, and the power of the pro-choice vote was recognized as a political fact of life in America. In the 1990 primary season, NARAL activists and pro-choice voters successfully unseated Penny Pullen, the leader of the anti-choice forces in the Illinois state legislature. And in Iowa, NARAL helped elect House Speaker Don Abenson as the Democratic nominee for governor.
The National Abortion Rights Action League officially endorsed Abenson. That endorsement developed into a powerful campaign weapon against his main challenger, pro-life candidate Tom Miller.
NARAL of Iowa has been a very positive factor in what we do here. They helped us define that issue of choice.
Those were major victories. Politicians noticed, and some began to shift to the pro-choice position. But in the state legislatures, anti-choice forces had been building strength for 17 years. They accepted the Supreme Court's invitation and introduced more than 350 bills designed to restrict a woman's right to choose in 43 states. NARAL worked to prepare elected officials and activists for the onslaught of legislation designed to dismantle the right to choose. Immediately after the Webster decision, Florida's Governor Martinez announced he would call a special legislative session specifically to enact restrictive laws. But the Florida lawmakers rejected the governor's anti-choice package and repudiated his attempts to undermine a woman's right to choose. Just 1 month later, the Pennsylvania legislature passed and Governor Casey signed into law an onerous and extreme bill, giving Pennsylvania the dubious distinction of being the first state to enact severe restrictions on the right to choose. Pennsylvania's law is so extreme, the court immediately enjoined most of it. In Michigan, the legislature passed a bill that severely restricted teenagers' access to abortion. Governor Blanchard vetoed the bill. Similar legislation was considered in 24 other states and enacted in South Carolina. And in Idaho, Governor Cecil Andrus vetoed an extreme bill that would have outlawed 95% of abortions in the state and returned women to the back alleys. Bills as restrictive as Idaho's were considered and rejected in Alabama, Minnesota, and 7 other states. Guam enacted America's most restrictive anti-abortion law, which prohibits all abortions except those performed to save the life of the woman. And on the eve of the anniversary of the Webster decision, the Louisiana legislature contemplated several bills, all designed to outlaw abortions, to criminalize the performance of an abortion, and to challenge Roe v. Wade, the 1973 U.S. Supreme Court decision that made abortion legal.
After Webster, the reality that we face is that it will only take one piece of anti-choice legislation to be passed by one anti-choice legislature, to be signed into law by one anti-choice governor, to work its way to the Supreme Court for the right to be taken away from all women in this nation. It only takes one piece of legislation to undo this vital and important, fundamental right. We're not going to give up. We're going to fight those battles, and we're going to continue to fight them in every state as long as it takes to secure this right. But the right to choose is now dependent on the legislative bodies in this nation, the state legislatures, Congress, and ultimately the White House. And so in order to reach our goal of ensuring the right to choose, we have got to elect pro-choice state legislators. We've got to ensure that every governor, the most important elective office, I think, in the nation post-Webster, is pro-choice. We've got to elect members of Congress so we secure a pro-choice Congress. And ultimately, we have to have a pro-choice president who will veto anti-choice legislation and understand that the role of government is to stay out of the private lives of individuals. Part of our work is geared to building the political infrastructure, district by district, precinct by precinct, everywhere in this nation, so that ultimately we have the building blocks, the frame, the house, the structure we need to ultimately secure this right and to do what it will take to secure this right. We've got to do that in every voting district in the nation. We're going to have numerous Supreme Court openings over the next few years because many of our supporters on the court are elderly, and they are going to want to retire at some time soon. That is why Senate races become so crucial, because it is the Senate that confirms or denies a Supreme Court nomination, the most important component of any good political campaign is the grassroots component, is organizing a political constituency that can volunteer in these races, can do the phone banking, help us do voter identification, help us do voter contact, help us get out the vote. I mean, it's the most important component, I think, of an effective electoral campaign. And through and with our affiliates, we are most effective, I think, as a grassroots organization. We've come to understand our force, our ability to be effective, to make change, and to affect elections, and to affect legislation. But the fact is that the threat is as close as the next election, the next legislative session, the next Supreme Court nomination. And our opponents have been organized for the last 17 years. They have been building their political clout for a long, long time. There are women in this nation, though we have the right, who do not have access to abortion. In many communities, there are no doctors. Women have to travel long distances. So we need to know that though there has been a right out there, the other side, our opponents have been working very hard for the last 17 years to interfere with this right, to put barriers up, to keep women from being able to exercise their choices. We have a long way to go, and this is a very important battle, and I think that every individual, each of you out there, needs to understand you play a vital, vital role. Every time you're on a phone bank, every time you walk to a house and give a piece of literature, every time you dig deep into your pockets to help NARAL with finances to support this work, you are making a contribution to preserving your own right and to securing the right of all women and families in this nation.
Right now, the choice is yours. You can vote to keep it that way, and you can work to keep it that way. Help NARAL secure your right to choose. Join us.